Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Supergirl Fan Journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King and Bilquis Evely is one of the hosts of the I Read Comic Books podcast, Kara Szymborski. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I introduced you as one of the hosts of the podcast that you're a part of, but you and I go way back to the late, great comic book shop, Alternate Realities.
Like, truly, my comic book origin story is that store. So it is a delight to be here speaking about comic books with you again. Because I think I first found that store when I was like, I think 15. And like, that's where I got into like monthly comic books through like Teen Titans and Birds of Prey. And that was like around the time that the Batman Superman Supergirl like reintroduction was happening. So like that was my first exposure to Supergirl like as a comic book as opposed to like a pop culture concept.
Right on. Now I want to talk more about both of our Supergirl fan journeys, but even before that, audience, you might have noticed I introduced our guest as Kara, not Kara.
Correct.
Would you like
the right
to?
Way.
Yes. Would you like to speak on this for a moment?
Yeah, there's it's Kara, Kara, and I share a name with Supergirl. And my parents did not know that Supergirl's name was Kara when they named me this. It was one of the Bond chicks from the Living Daylights is named Kara. They were looking at a list of like Eastern European names, because I'm sure you heard the last name Szymborski and you're like, okay, all right. So they were like short Eastern European names, so it's on the list. So it is a pure coincidence that I am also a blue-eyed blonde who is invulnerable. But you know, it's man, I don't even know when I first became aware of Supergirl, because it feels like one of those characters where they just have her on a lot of stuff. Like, even if you're not reading comics, you've seen an image of Supergirl on, like, I'm thinking like back to the 90s. Like, if you go into Party City, she would have been on like girls' birthday party stuff. And like, they would have had like children's age books that had her as a character kind of thing. But I probably first saw her in some form on like the Justice League animated series when she was in, it's like the Bruce Timm verse with like the white t-shirt ringer top with the mini skirt and the headband. And then, like I said, that the Michael Turner illustrations where she's got like the Y2K like washboard abs, but also like she's got like some good shoulders on there and some big fists. So I did like that contrast, but that was probably where I first became aware of her as like, oh, this is a character. You've been making stories about her. This is a whole thing. But every time I hear like different interpretations of how you say her name, I'm just so used to it, because everybody's got a different way of saying this name. If you get Brits, they're going Kara, or they're starting to slide into wanting to say Clara. Kiwis go Kira. If I say my name is Kara, people will start spelling it with a Kira. Like, it's all over the place. So I'm just like, no, I mean, it's Kara, but if you get somewhere in that ballpark, I'll respond.
Right on. Yeah, this has been a bit of a running question / debate / internal struggle anytime the character has come up on the podcast. By the way, audience, as you can hear, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is a little rough. Bear with me. The content will be good, even if I don't sound as lovely as normal. But it's one of those things. In my head, it was always Kara, and that was reinforced, confirmed by Superman the Animated Series, which used Kara, and my beloved Smallville, which also called her Kara. So for years and years, it was Kara. Now, yes, you did have the 1984 movie. They didn't say her name a ton, but when they did, it was Kara. But otherwise, it was always Kara in my head and in what I heard. And then along comes this Melissa Benoist television series, and it's Kara. And now that has stuck. And we've gotten that now in the subsequent on-screen iterations. And I have to accept it, I guess. But
they're wrong. They're wrong. You're original. You can stick with Smallville. That's the canon.
I suppose. I think just for consistency's sake, to avoid confusion while you're here for this episode, I think I will refer to the character as Kara, except when we are talking about the DCAU and Smallville, where there it was firmly Kara. But otherwise, I'll surrender to the Kara Zor-El pronunciation. I feel like you're going to disagree with me on this, and I totally understand that. Do you feel, though, that Kara is a little bit more exotic sounding or alien sounding, or no?
Like you could argue that they're like trying to go for a vowel that sounds closer to the A in Clark to make it sound like they're more related, but I don't know. Are they going Kal? It's like Kal-El. It's not Kal-El. So like that gets thrown out the window then. So I don't know.
True. Now, you mentioned the DCAU. You mentioned that Superman, Batman, Supergirl arc by Jeff Loeb and Michael Turner. Both of those are tent poles and early tent poles in my own Supergirl fandom. There's one major piece, though, for me that comes before that, and that's the Triangle era post-crisis Matrix iteration of the character. This protoplasmic being from a pocket universe who came over to our world, took the form of Supergirl, struck up a romantic relationship with Lex Luthor II, who was actually the original Lex Luthor in a cloned body, and then went on to have this entire Peter David written series where she became an Earthborn angel. We're going to be getting into all of that. But I do feel like one of the prevalent themes of this podcast series and my fan journey has been, and once again, for the record, and everybody knows this, like I love the Triangle era to death. That made me a fan of Superman and all of these characters. But time and again, I come into these episodes and I'm like, I met this character or concept or relationship or dynamic or setting in a weird way. Because
in a very weird, possibly the weirdest way you possibly could learn about this character.
I mean, no joke. People know I started with the death of Superman, and in the death of Superman, Supergirl, a big part for her throughout the story is she wants to get involved, and Lex is trying to hold her back, but eventually she gets into it. And she has this confrontation with Doomsday, and he punches her, and her face turns into this like blob because she's this protoplasm being, and then she reverts back to that protoplasmic form. And if memory serves, it was an issue of Man of Steel drawn by John Bogdanov, so like very, very just striking and over the top. But that image of her face being punched into this like purple blob, for lack of a better description, seared into my young brain. And it's one of those things I'm like, what the hell did I think that was at 5 years old? Like that was my first introduction to Supergirl.
Oh, wait a minute. You were reading that at 5?
It was read to me. It was read. That first one was read to me. But then as we got into the funeral, then I was reading, but that first one was read to me.
Sure.
But like that was how I met Supergirl.
You met Supergirl because she was a blob. Great.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I'll be kind of untangling as we make our way through. At the end of the day, I have a lot of affection for the Matrix Supergirl. She doesn't win the day for me, though, in the pantheon of Supergirls that we've had, but I'll always have a soft spot because that's the one I started with.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, the DCAU was formative, and then very much so that Superman, Batman, Supergirl arc, and we're going to be doing a whole episode on that and its animated adaptation, because that was the reintroduction of the cousin from Krypton iteration of the character. And even though I had a decade's worth of the Matrix stories kind of floating around in my head,
right,
that Superman Batman arc really was, I think, the first time where it clicked in a different way. And I'm like, I see the value in this kind of a Supergirl story. And then that was very shortly thereafter reinforced on Smallville when they introduced the character, and she was a big part of the show in season 7. And I think that really kind of cemented what I generally tend to look for in the character.
Okay. It's, I was thinking about it. I only know the Matrix version of Supergirl through the DC Comics Encyclopedia from like 2005 or 2006. They had an entry about her, and I just remember reading the entry and being like, what the heck is this? Because it's just, to me, Supergirl is in the same category as Wonder Woman in the DCU, where they simply do not know what to do with her, because every like decade or so there's like a new version and a characterization, and the last like 30 years probably, I've been noticing this kind of pattern where they make Supergirl like more angry in her characterization, like with the whole like Lantern stuff, she was a Red Lantern. In that Michael Turner Supergirl reintroduction, like she's being like co-opted by Apocalypse, but like so, and like Wonder Woman gets that way too. So I'm just like, there's this like weird layer of DC like not knowing to do what with their like tentpole female characters and going the route of like, oh, they're just so angry. Look at those angry, passionate women. And it's like, I don't really know how to fully unpack that. So it was nice that with the book that we're talking about today, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, there's like a little bit of that, but it's not like, oh, like girl angry. It's more like, yeah, she's a fully formed character with complex emotions that she's like allowed to have in this book.
Right on. No, I hear you on that. I will say, or actually, let me ask, did you ever read the Sterling Gates run on the Supergirl title during the New Krypton saga, post Infinite Crisis?
Post which crisis?
Infinite Crisis.
I probably read a little bit. I'm trying to think of the timeline of because this was like I was reading the most DC around this time, and then I like went cold turkey after Final Crisis. So I probably read a little bit.
Okay, yeah, this was like 2008 to 2010 ish, roughly. Mm-hmm. And I'm not just saying this because, spoiler alert, Sterling Gates is coming on the show. We're gonna have a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to talking to him. But I've been rereading that entire run, and it really is a bright spot. Like I get what you're saying about this characterization that you've seen pop up since her reintroduction. But I would say that run in particular, definitely a bright spot and something that I would encourage people to check out, especially if maybe they bumped up against some of these depictions, like we're referencing here.
Yeah.
I guess last question, name related. Once you got into the character, did you feel any more of an affinity for the character because you shared a name, or did that not really move the needle?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It is so nice to just be like, yeah, Supergirl and I share a name. No, like when I went into a local comic shop to get my copy of this comic book, and like they remembered me. Like I'd never been to this shop before, and they remembered me when I went to pick up the book because they were like, oh yeah, like Kara buying the book about Kara, of course. I'm like, yeah.
Right on. So now here we have Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King, Bilquis Evely. And this was an 8-issue miniseries from 2021 and early 2022. And it is the basis for the forthcoming Supergirl movie, originally also titled Woman of Tomorrow. They've since shortened it. Are we looking forward to the movie? Are we excited? Are we happy that it's taking its cues from this story? Where are you on this right now?
We are at cautious optimism. Like I think we'll dive into it when we get into the nitty-gritty of the story, but I think that the casting is impeccable, like pitch perfect casting for the main character. I like that they are getting to like the more like tentpole characters for DC or Marvel end up being boring because there's only so much you can do with them because they want to protect the IP. But with those secondary and tertiary characters, that's when you can really have like story arcs and like character development. So I'm interested to see if they like do that with Supergirl as opposed to just having her be like this one note thing to sell lunchboxes or whatever. The thing that is causing me a little bit of trepidation now that I have reread this story is that this comic book is so stunning and so nuanced and has such like beautiful, not languid pacing, but you feel like you're being told a story. You're being told a story that's really like an epic tale pieced together from other epic tales. And like I said, there is more like emotional complexity and nuance in this version of Supergirl. And if they like properly like transposed this into film with all of the level of like heaviness and nuance that they have, it could and should win an Oscar. But instead, I think they're going to do Supergirl gets drunk and curses.
Yeah, I hear you on that because, yeah, especially rereading this story, and this was the third time now that I've read it, it definitely has this very grand mythic, fantastical sense to it. You are being told a story that's narrated by our character, Ruth, who enlists the help of Supergirl to get revenge on Krem of the Yellow Hills, who killed Ruth's faithful father. And so Ruth and Supergirl embark on this intergalactic quest. Ostensibly, the reason why Supergirl is going along with this and bringing Ruth is that Krypto has been poisoned by arrows shot by Krem, and she needs to find Krem and that original poison in order to save Krypto. Now, spoiler alert, we find out at the end of the story that's actually a ruse, and rather there's a higher lesson that Kara is trying to impart to Ruth. But that's our basic setup here. I did not read this as it was originally coming out. I read it in collected edition within the past few years. Enjoyed it. Then I reread it right when the teaser trailer for the movie dropped because I wanted to refresh my memory on exactly what was in the book and what the movie was pulling from. Because there were a couple of things that upon that initial watch of the trailer, I'm like, oh, that sounds like it's right from the book. Like the whole idea of Krypton didn't die in a day. The gods are not that kind. And so I was like, all right, I want to refresh my memory. And I had a good time rereading it. And then I read it yet again last night in preparation for this. Sadly, this was probably the least that I enjoyed it of the three. Part of me is like, you should have stopped it too. But overall, I do remain a fan of this. Now, did you read this as it was coming out later? Like, when did you come to this? I mean, it's only been out for a few years anyway, but.
Right. Well, because like you said, this would have been published like during the pandemic. So like I was not going to comic book stores at this time. I read this after it came out. Some of my co-panelists on the I Read Comic Books podcast had highly recommended it. And I think I got it out from the library, and I was just blown away by the artwork. And I was really glad that I got to sit down and read it all at once. I do think that if I had read it month to month, it would have had a different effect just in terms of the pacing, because it definitely is written as like each of the issues is its own sort of self-contained story, and they're on this weeks or months long journey for the majority of the book. So that would have made it feel like I was on the journey at the same time as them, whereas reading it all at once, it's more like it's almost too much. Like you should maybe take breaks between the chapters.
That's a great point. And that actually ties into something that I observed rereading it. It definitely feels, it's funny because I think a criticism you hear about a lot of modern comics, and we've been hearing it for years and years now, is, writing for the trade. I don't feel like this was written for the trade. This felt a lot more episodic to the point where look, I won't go so far as to say, oh man, what a slog to get through those 8 issues last night. Yet at the same time, I didn't necessarily get to the end of an issue and be like, oh man, I have to see what happens next. It was more kind of like I got to the end and I felt, okay, maybe I need to sit with this a little bit. And I guess that kind of somewhat runs counter to what you were saying, right? About how maybe it wouldn't have worked reading it month to month. I don't know. But I kind of had that feeling as I was reading it, but still overall enjoyed it. Visually, it is absolutely stunning. That's such a core piece to it. So yeah, that aspect, sort of that mythic tale vibe to it. I'm curious to what extent that will translate to the film. One of the things that I think you hear about a lot with this work is how it's so character defining or redefining for Supergirl. Do you feel that? Because I kind of have a little bit of a take on this, but I want to get your perspective first.
Thank you for not influencing me.
Oh, no.
No, it's kind of what I was saying earlier, where they kind of don't know what to do with her. And there's this back and forth, like she was, like, not to be crass about it, but she was a blob. And then she was and then she was an angry, lost teenage girl. And then you said there's that bright spot between Infinite and Final Crisis. And then she's back to being angry again. And now she's like, I do like that I guess they maybe aged her up a little bit for this Woman of Tomorrow run, because like when you meet her, she is celebrating her 21st birthday. And so how old she is. And Supergirl is typically characterized as being a teenager. Like that's like a core piece of that character. So making her 21, like, yeah, like her, by human standards, her brain's not fully developed, but she's not like, running around with like full teenage hormones at 15 punching things. She's got like a little more gravitas. And I think part of that is like this book makes very, very, very clear that she has been traumatized in ways that we cannot possibly fathom. And she's coming at the world with this sense of like, she has seen how bad it can get, and she will continue to bear that burden so that other people don't have to. And so she's like a quieter version of Supergirl, if that makes sense. Like if you see a lot of close-ups on her face when she's having moments of like intense contemplation, she's not like smiling all the time. You can like, there's like some 100-yard stare looks where you're like, oh yeah, this girl has seen some things. So like for me, this is probably one of the most introspective takes on the character I've ever seen.
Gotcha. Yeah. Man, I've been thinking about this a lot because, this is one of these things, obviously basis for the movie. DC's really been pushing it. It's available in softcover, in deluxe edition hardcover, in compact edition, digitally, of course. I don't get a cut of any of this. I'm just saying, if you want to read it, it's readily available.
They are making it very available to you.
They've made it very available. And I think that it has a lot of value going back to comic shop origins here. This is one of those things where alternate reality is still around, or I still behind the counter. I would confidently give this to people. And the fact that I don't think it's technically out of continuity, but it's definitely something that can be read on its own, completely independently. And I think there's always a lot of value in that. And like we're saying, a very distinct visual style. So I think it has a lot of value in being this complete package that you can give to someone that I do think gives you the core, most salient aspects of the character. As far as the extent to which it defines or redefines the character, and I don't say this to put the work down or anything, but I do feel like maybe people have extrapolated like a little bit more from this, because the whole idea of her losing Krypton multiple times over, its initial destruction, then the escape by way of Argo City, but then we have the radiation poisoning and people start dying. They have to put down the lead shielding. And then eventually we get this asteroid or meteor storm, and once again, days are numbered, and she's finally in that rocket and then stuck in suspended animation and arrives later than originally intended. The baby she was meant to care for is now a fully grown adult. I mean, those have been part of the origin story already. Clearly, King here was able to really lean in to the trauma that would cause. So I do feel like, yes, this was mined here, probably more so than we had seen in the past, but I do feel like those ideas certainly have been at play, and sort of her feeling out of sorts by the way in which she arrived, the fact that she had all of this time on Krypton as opposed to Kal-El, who left as a baby, all of that. I also really think that people have made way too much of that first issue where she's purposely sought out a red sun planet so that she can get drunk and celebrate her 21st birthday. Maybe James Gunn made too much. He read that. He's like, oh, this is great. I still think in terms of what we saw of that cameo in the Superman movie and the little bit we've gotten from the Supergirl teaser trailer, I still think that's meant to be a jumping off point, just like it's a jumping off point in the miniseries. Like I keep saying this because it's not like she's a drunken mess throughout this entire miniseries.
Right.
It's really just our starting point here. And so I think throughout this story, you do see a little bit more of an edge than I think is typical. Although I don't know, maybe not. If you go back to some of those like New 52 stories that you were referencing with the Red Lantern stuff and whatnot, but definitely a little bit more of an edge. She curses in this in a way that we probably haven't seen before. There's one really standout moment. I know I'm really jumping ahead, but Kara and Ruth are tracking these space pirates that Krem has linked up with, and they're tracing this trail of genocide, very harrowing. And we get to one point where one of these pirates has been apprehended, and the people of this planet stone him to death. And Kara allows that to happen. And that's not something that I would anticipate Clark would stand by for. And I don't know maybe even if past versions of Kara would either, maybe debatable. But so I think there are definitely instances where you do see more of that edge. And we're definitely leaning in more to the trauma brought about by losing Krypton multiple times over. So I'm not saying this isn't doing anything distinct, but at the same time, yeah, I don't look at this as such a reinvention of the character. And I feel like sometimes that's how this gets talked about.
It's probably because, as you said, it's a good starting off point for people who are less familiar with the character. So if someone knows about the concept of Supergirl but hasn't read a story, you can hand this to them and say, like, this is the most recent, like, version of this character, and it's a one and done, and you don't need to have read all the other stuff, but there are some really fun Easter eggs if you have. And it's with all the things in this book, like having mined previous iterations of the character to get the Argo City, to have Crypto, to have Comet the super horse, which is probably one of my favorite parts of this. Like, those are all there, but it took this creative team to be like, okay, but what are the actual implications of all of these things? Because in superhero comics, it's so easy to just be like, destruction, and like not really think about it. This is a book that sits with all that destruction in all its different forms. And that is probably why it feels so different to people. But as you said, it's nothing really new. It's just a new way of making you sit with it.
Yeah, no, well said. I agree with that. Now, one of the things, though, that's so fascinating to me about this, and just kind of the behind the scenes process of how these stories come to be and take form. So when it was announced that Lobo was going to be in the movie, I know the reaction initially from a lot of folks was like, well, he's not in the comic, right? Well, originally he was meant to be, right? Like Tom King's, are you familiar with the backstory of this?
No, please share.
So Tom King, he's talked about this in interviews originally. So the whole setup for this, I don't know if people have seen True Grit, but it's True Grit, like this whole team up revenge story sort of thing, with the more, innocent companion and the more kind of grizzled, rough around the edges hero, reluctant hero. So the original idea for this, as King has described it, rather than Ruth and Kara, it was meant to be Kara and Lobo. Like Lobo, or Kara enlists Lobo's help. And so Kara fit more into the innocent Ruth type mold. Mm-hmm. And then Lobo is the rough, reluctant hero. And obviously pivoted into a different direction here and totally inverted it, right? And now moved Supergirl into that quote unquote Lobo role and introduced the character of Ruth. I'm not saying it takes away from it, but it's just kind of interesting that
it would have been a very different tale.
It would have been an entirely different story. The other thing too is that arguably the most pivotal issue of this, at least for me, is issue number 6, where Supergirl, riding Comet, is outracing the Mordru orb. And while she's doing this, we have Ruth recounting Kara's backstory as Kara related it to her. So this is the origin story issue where we learn everything that I just laid out about how she lost Krypton multiple times over and how it was so traumatic for her. And that was not originally part of the story. King wrote an entire issue 6 that was rejected by editorial. And they were like, no, like take another stab at this. And because he talks about this in the introduction to the deluxe hardcover, and they actually include the original script for issue 6 in the book. I did not delve that deeply into this. I'm sorry, but it's there. I got to draw the line somewhere.
Sure.
But it's so interesting to me. And the way he describes it, he said to them, he was like, okay, what was there in that original script that you liked that I can kind of build on? Because apparently he had a 24-hour turnaround. Like he had to get the script. Oh my God. And apparently there were a couple of pages, a couple of beats where he delved into the origin. And they were like, that seems to be the heart of this. Mm-hmm. And so he rebuilt the entire issue around that. It's just wild to me because arguably, even knowing generally what Kara's backstory is, I really don't know, like everything that we're talking about King leaning into the trauma and making you really sit in it and exploring the implications. Like I agree with all of that, but I feel like if you lift out that issue 6, I don't know that this holds together in the same way. It's funny because with editorial, a lot of times we think and talk about it in terms of editorial interference. Sometimes editors have really good notes. Sometimes editors need to step in more, I feel. but that's wild to me that we could have been looking at a version of the story without issue 6, because I feel like that's the linchpin of this.
Well, then it wouldn't have become this whole like, oh, this is the redefinition of Supergirl. It would have just been a Supergirl in space story.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I know. This is getting more of like fan type question here, but since we don't have Lobo in this story, in the comic book story, but we know he's in the movie. Is there, as you're rereading the story, is there a place that you see for Lobo? Like, were there any moments as you were reading where like, oh, I could see them kind of inserting Lobo here, or were you not really entertaining that as you were reading?
Off the top of my head, because I was definitely not thinking about that while reading, he would probably do very well is the cameo of the dude in the seat between them on the transport who gets punched in the face for being an asshole.
Ah, okay.
So, like if they use him like effectively like that, where it's like it's for the fans, but you don't need to know, and it doesn't become like it's a Supergirl story, but it's really a Lobo story. But I really feel like I had actually totally forgotten that they were putting Lobo in that film. So now knowing that the trailer has like drunk Supergirl and Lobo, I'm kind of like, oh, they're definitely going the like, this is nothing like Superman. Supergirl is the body one. Like, I will be pleasantly surprised if they keep it on a more grounded level than like hooligans in space.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll evaluate when the movie comes out. But I share that question / concern. But that would be an interesting place to use him. I guess I was thinking, so early on in that first issue, when Ruth initially leaves her home to seek revenge and enlists the aid of a bounty hunter, and he's very unscrupulous and he takes her sword and he knocks her down, and that's when Supergirl gets involved. I could see Lobo in that sort of vein.
Oh yeah, he could do that, and then he'd be like, it would be like Supergirl and Lobo sort of like exasperatedly chasing each other across the galaxy and like kind of at conflict, but then it becomes more of like a buddy comedy or like mild antagonism as opposed to like, let's talk about genocide, kids.
Okay, so on that note, I have a few questions, comments from our patrons. I'd like to hit those, and then we could just do a little bit more of like a high level overview of each of the issues, and I think we'll be good. So our pal Chase says, "I love the art in this book. There's this dreamlike quality to it that fits the cosmic adventure of the book. I also hope Supergirl wielding a sword makes it into the movie. Her swashbuckling, brazen attitude helps her stand out from Superman. One of my favorite issues is number 5, where Ruth has to step up and help them survive when the sun is poisoning Kara. Definitely, we'll talk more about that. But then Chase says, is there an issue or moment you would prefer left out of the movie? Building off of what you just said, Kara, it's like, how heavily do you think they're going to lean into the genocide? There's a lot of genocide in this book for a PG-13 movie.
Yeah, they're either not going to touch upon it or they're going to do it in a really surface level way that is like not the point of this book. I'm trying to think like things to leave out. Like if it's done well, the whole like blue versus purple thing could be so powerful, but I don't think that's the kind of movie that they're telling. So if they're not going to treat that with the like space that it needs, they should just cut it, because if they're going to keep it, but like that whole issue is so impactful because you like see enough of your own world in it where it makes you uncomfortable, and you see Kara's reaction to it. But like, I don't think they're going to have enough room in a 2-hour-long movie to let it breathe. So they should just not go there.
I agree. Yeah. From issue 3, where they visit the town of Maypole on this planet as they're following Krem. And yeah, we find out that this group of blues had sold out this group of purples, this racially discriminated against and segregated portion of their society, sold them out to these space pirates to be slaughtered. It's very affecting. I agree with you. I don't know. I think that's something that definitely requires a deft touch. I don't know if this movie will have it. I will also say, as impactful as it was reading it, in terms of the larger narrative, I feel like if there's one piece that kind of lifts out, it's that. I mean, it's obviously they're following Krem and all that, but I feel like once he more fully links up with these space pirates and then they're tracking them from planet to planet, we get a little bit more momentum. I feel like if there was a chapter of this that you could excise, but still kind of keep that larger narrative together, there's that. Also, and not to get political, but it's like, I don't know. would all the audience members even get what the takeaway should be from that part of the
No.
story? And that's a troubling aspect. So I feel like the genocide overall, I feel like they're probably going to pull their punches on that and maybe reduce it more to pillaging, destruction, as opposed to outright genocide. But then more specifically, that issue 3, I feel like that's something that could likely will and arguably should maybe not make it in. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. I talk about Smallville a lot, but when it comes to listening, one podcast is at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And while their series rewatch has concluded, the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk. Listen wherever you get podcasts and keep an eye out for the other shows on the Always Hold On To network. I'm a parent, which means that a family-friendly comic shop is a must, and there's none better than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. Follow them on social media and at awyeahcomics.com for news about signings, live sales, and much more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. Jan says, is this the best Supergirl story? It's the first and only time she's really clicked for me as a character. Well, for me, Jan, no, but I think for a lot of people, they probably would say yes. Is it the best for you?
I think it's the one where she's the most like fully realized character, because in so many of the other versions, it's like she's Supergirl's cousin, or she's Superman's cousin, or she's the like girl version of Superman, or she's a teenager. And they like a lot of writers, I think, just don't really know what to do with her to differentiate her. And in this one, she felt like a fully realized character where her relation to Superman is almost incidental.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing too is like I'm saying, more of an edge to her than we've seen before, but not overly or predominantly angry, not a drunken mess throughout the whole thing.
No.
Even though, again, I do feel like sometimes that the Kara from this story, sometimes I feel like gets mischaracterized as people are maybe quickly summarizing what this is about.
Yeah.
And I do think it is so important that what this ultimately comes down to in terms of Ruth although we'll have more to say about the ending, but sort of Ruth learning this lesson that Supergirl's trying to impart about the futility of this revenge quest. Like ultimately Ruth's realization is drawn from all of these acts of compassion that Kara has performed. Maybe my favorite page of the entire story is sort of this montage of all of these compassionate acts that Ruth has observed, like Kara teaching Ruth to wash her hands.
Oh yeah.
When they're traveling, or helping the grave digger dig all of those graves on that planet ravaged by the space pirates. Moments like that, seeing how affected Kara was by the Maypole incident and things like that. So, ultimately I think this is a showcase of the character's compassion, not anger or drunkenness or anything like that. So
right.
A very valuable story, an effective story, but yeah, Jan, I don't know. I'm a little reluctant to hold it up quite as high, but I'm glad if it is for you. Jared says, this was an absolute joy to reread. It's definitely one of the best books Tom King has done with DC. I agree on that front. And it's a beautiful story about grief, the drive for revenge, and womanhood. Now, my question. We know that Krypto will be in the movie, but what do you guys think is the over-under chance of Comet also showing up?
They won't. And if they do, they're going to make somebody, especially if Lobo's involved, Lobo's going to make some weird sex joke about the horse. But because Comet in this book is used so effectively, especially if you know some of the backstory about that character, because everything that they do with Comet in this book is like previous DC canon stuff. Like Comet is a horse who is a prince who is transformed into a horse and is in love with Supergirl, and she knows it and he knows it and they both know it, but she's still riding him. So there is a sex joke in there that is low hanging fruit for Lobo, but also it's I am a horse girl. And let me tell you, when you are like a pre-adolescent horse girl and you're just like, I would love to be chosen by a unicorn in the woods and just like run it, like it's the whole like Tina Belcher thing, right? Like you just want to have your magical mystical bond with your horse who's also your best friend. And so I think Comet is like the ultimate horse girl like fantasy of like, oh, this is a sort of a romantic fantasy, but ultimately this is a man who's never going to be able to actually like hurt me or assault me, and like I'm in control, but it's like a benevolent control kind of thing. So I do not think that any part of this film will treat it from that perspective. I think it will just be like magical horse. And like maybe there's a man in there, who knows? But like again, it's like if done well with the right creative team, it could be pretty cool. I do not think this is that creative team.
Okay, yeah. So it seems like a bit of a theme here in in our assessment. No, but it's interesting is that there's a lot of interesting work and nuanced choices in this story, and it seems like what you're expressing, and I do share it, right, is a little bit of a question mark as far as the extent to which the film would be interested in really interrogating that, and also sort of have the capability to do it in a way that we see on the page here. And we could both be proven wrong. They might get into all of these things and do it in a really interesting way, and I would love to see that. I think you look at the initial previews and, I'm not, how do I put this? I'm not necessarily in this camp. I know there are a lot of folks who saw that teaser and they're like, oh, he's just doing Guardians of the Galaxy with Supergirl. I can see where people would see something like that. I don't necessarily share that. I do still remain cautiously optimistic, going back to what you were saying before, that this will feel like its own thing. Yet, at the same time, I just don't know if we'll kind of get into all of these points. So I don't know. Jury's out.
Well, because in this comic, there is a lot here. Something that I really enjoy about this book is that this is a creative team who trusts the audience to keep up with them. They're not wasting a lot of time like spelling it out again. Like, there's like the repetition of the narrative that is inherent with having a multi like single issue series coming out where you have to kind of like be able to be picked up at any point. But this is like the whole Comet stuff. They're not sitting there having exposition for pages and pages about like, here's the backstory of Comet and why you should care. It's like, I feel like there's enough there where it's like, Supergirl has this horse who like has her back. And at the last second, like before he dies, you find out that Comet is like going to save her because at some point like she saved him and like they both know. So you just like you feel in like a span of about 3 panels that there's something deeper here that is now lost. And like I was personally very emotionally affected by this, but it's like they didn't need to like hammer it in or like go into the backstory. It was enough to just be like he was a horse who was really a man and he loved her and she knew, and then he's dead. And you're like, oh no. But because it's being treated with respect and gravitas, you feel it as opposed to it being a punchline.
Yeah. So I forgot to answer the question myself about Comet. So
yes.
like I guess I have multiple competing thoughts because there's a part of me that says, this might be a little too weird or out there. But then the other part of me, I know Gunn is not the director, but he's the overlord of the DCU. And part of me is like, nah, it's just weird enough that like he would be into this.
He might do it. Yeah.
And to your point that even though this is not a good reason necessarily, but that kind of the instinct to make some of those jokes like we're talking about might be too tough to resist. And so we might find Comet in there for that reason.
Yeah.
And we bring up a good point. I was thinking this too as I was reading it. We don't get the whole backstory of Comet in the book, and I feel like they could do something similarly in the movie where it's just this really quick description, and it's just like, okay, here we go. We have Comet. So I could see it going either way. I don't really feel that strongly. I know there are folks who are like, oh, I'd love to see Comet. I'm like, sure. It's not something that would take me out of it, but I'm not. This isn't like I'll die on the Conduit hill. Like I want to see friggin' Conduit in one of these stories at some point in my lifetime. I don't feel the same way about Comet, but I think there's an opportunity. I really could see it going either way, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Now our last our last pair of patron comments / questions kind of point to one of the other big picture things. We've already been getting at it in terms of how the story is being told. There is a heavy amount of narration because we are essentially reading a book that Ruth has written in her later years about this adventure she shared with Supergirl. And Ruth, both in the prose that she has written, as well as her dialogue throughout the story in the present day, highly verbose, really uses a flowery language. It's a very wordy book. Yeah. And I guess I want to get your take on how that works or perhaps doesn't for you in certain instances. And we kind of have a couple of comments here that tee that up. So I'll summarize Rick's point here. Basically, he says he's tried multiple times to get through this and kind of hits a wall each time. And then building off of that, Brian Dempsey says, first, I want to say I enjoyed the story. I liked Kara's portrayal. It made sense. I love the art. It's fluid and clean. The colors pop. It took me a couple of issues, but I felt invested in the characters. The trope of just taking the powers out of the super character is a little overdone, but worked for me here. I'll jump in here to say that, again, she's not powerless throughout the whole thing. It takes a couple of issues, but she makes her way back to a yellow sun area of the galaxy. So that too, is not like she's depleted throughout the entire thing. Obviously, you have an issue like issue 5 where they're in this kryptonite sun planet. That's its own thing. But otherwise, she mostly has her powers. However, Brian continues, about halfway through, I noticed I could read just the word balloons. I don't have to read the detailed and lengthy narration to follow the story. The script and action stand on their own. That's not to say the narration doesn't add value, or rather, I don't know what my takeaway should be. Is it good or bad that you can mostly or entirely skip the narrative boxes and follow the story? Have you or anyone else tried this and had the same experience as me? I don't know that I agree that you could just skip it and get the full story, to be honest. But I welcome your thoughts on that.
Yeah, okay, so rereading this was a treat because I had remembered that I liked it and I had remembered the visuals and I had remembered the basic gist of where we were going, but I had forgotten most of the details. So it was truly enjoyable to reread this book. And the part that made it so enjoyable is I had forgotten the twist. I had forgotten the twist, which is the whole point of the narration. So again, full spoilers for this book. You're reading, as you said, beautiful description. It is flowery language. It is over the top, like ornately wrought. You're listening to Ruth's dialogue at the start of this book in particular, and you're like, this is not how people talk. And like, maybe it's like an alien thing, and they're doing it like, this is how people talk on this planet. One of the bounty hunters makes a comment about how she's so educated or whatever. And so it is a very description heavy book, prose heavy book at points, especially with telling like the Supergirl backstory stuff about her, how she survived all of these like horrible calamities on her homeworld to survive. And then you get to like the last like few pages of the book and you find out that Ruth made up the whole thing. And so you have an unreliable narrator telling you, who also at one point early in the book said that she and Supergirl didn't really talk a lot on this journey together. She said, we knew what we were doing. We didn't really say anything to each other. So she's saying one thing, writing another, and then at the end, she's like, never mind, I made the whole thing up. You'll never really know. So I'm just kind of like, oh, we were reading your bestseller. It doesn't matter.
Okay, a couple of interesting things here. So, because when we catch up with older Ruth and Supergirl decades, or centuries later, yes, Ruth does refer to the book as what, fictitious dribble drabble or something, to that effect. So, I guess maybe you've answered this. I mean, how unreliable is she? I mean, like, how much stock do you put in what we've seen? Because I guess I still do generally feel like what we saw unfold is this adventure that Supergirl had. But you don't feel that way. Does it really seem like this is just totally a yarn?
And I forget what I'm paraphrasing from here, but like any good lie is going to have a heart of truth, right? So I think that the core of what she's communicating about Supergirl's character and the overall vibe of their quest, that's all correct. I think the overwrought prose is her, like, whatever flight of fancy she had was selling books, or maybe she was even over romanticizing what was happening to distract from the stuff that Supergirl wanted her to like point away from. Because if we have to ignore everything prior to that end scene where they're older together as like an unreliable narrator and part fabrication, then the truth of the story that we have is those final few pages where you see Ruth getting to confront this dude after centuries of penance in the Phantom Zone, and Supergirl lets her kill him, which is like to the earlier point of her like letting the guy get stoned to death, which, to your point, not something Clark would have stood by and let happen. So if we're looking at that as the truth of the matter, like seeds of that are throughout this story, so we can accept it as a good story. And the heart of it is, here's these two women who trust and respect one another enough to have kept this centuries-long allyship up.
All right, I want to circle back to the ending and our takeaway on the ending, because I do think there's some room for interpretation, and I've seen these debates, so I want to circle back to that. But I guess to Brian's question and this larger point about the way the story's told, well, I guess on one front, this is another place where I'm curious how the movie will handle it, because the comic is very much from the point of view of Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
It's her story that Supergirl is a part of. I don't really see the movie taking that same approach. I really don't see the movie utilizing the narration. Truthfully, I don't think they should. But I could be wrong on all of these fronts. But that's one thing that I'm thinking. It's just in terms of the point of view. Like, I'm curious how the movie will approach it, because the comic is very much Ruth's story. I do differ from Brian. I do think you lose something if you're not reading the narration. I mean, oh my God. I mean, issue 6, when we get the whole recounting of the origin. I mean, yes, the art conveys a lot, but there's also a lot in that narration
in the words
that Ruth is recounting. And I think more than anything, even if it's not so much plot that we're getting from the narration, it's texture and insight into the character. So I don't know. To someone like Rick, for example, if you're really having a hard time getting through the story, and skipping the narration is a way to kind of get over the hump and get all the way through it, sure. I mean, give it a shot.
Yeah.
And then maybe you'll be intrigued enough to want to go back. But, so those are all our Patreon comments and questions. So thanks to all those folks. So yeah, while we're here, let's just unpack this, this ending here. Because in the last couple of issues, so basically this is very episodic, but the last 2 issues really do work together here, where we have this confrontation in space between Kara and these space pirates that Krem has linked up with. And to your earlier point, we do have this moment where Comet leaves Ruth's side on the planet below, on this beautiful beach setting, to go help Kara, essentially takes a bullet for her, sacrifices himself for her. So we have that piece, the outer space battle. But then we have Krem, who Supergirl and Ruth were able to apprehend, tied up on this tree. And this lingering question about whether Ruth will take this opportunity to enact her revenge. Initially, Comet is there to keep her from doing that. But then she's able to convince Comet to go help Supergirl. And so she has this moment. She's prepared to enact her revenge, but then she feels it would be unfair to strike someone down while they're tied up. So essentially allows this duel to commence, where they actually have a physical altercation, and she gains the upper hand to her credit. Maybe this speaks to the unreliability of the narrator. I don't know, but hey, she was highly motivated. But even when she's bested him in combat, and by rights could take her justice, her revenge, she can't bring herself to deliver that killing blow. And then Supergirl returns with the fallen Comet now returned to human form in her arms. And Kara now really kind of broken by what she has experienced, what she's endured, this trail of genocide that they follow, this harrowing battle in space, the loss of Comet. She takes the sword, and she's prepared to deliver this. And this is, at this point, this is where we finally have this revelation that Kara actually didn't need Ruth to find Krem to figure out what was in the poison that took down Krypto. Krypto's fine. Which, by the way, very relieved about that. I hope the movie doesn't make too much of a meal out of Krypto being injured or in danger. We love Krypto. I don't need to see too much of that.
Well, it's like reading it, I was like, okay, we're doing John Wick. It's Supergirl John Wick. But then you find out it's not. So the film could lean into that, but you're right, they should not.
Right. So we get that revelation, which I quite liked because it was just a relief to know crypto's fine. Crypto's been fine the whole time. And also kind of speaking to the compassion of Kara. It's like this wasn't just a mission of import because of crypto. It's like, no, she was trying to help this young girl because she knew if she just said, hey, let it go, Ruth would never be able to let this go. But then in this moment where Kara's got the sword, she's like, I told you all of this, but I still dream of Krypton. Like basically, I've not been able to let my trauma go, right? My anger towards this go. So how could I expect you to? And she's ready to deliver the blow. And then this is where we get Ruth finally speaking like, no, I get it. And we get this montage of all of these acts of compassion, right? Like the lesson landed for her. And so Kara kind of drops it. And then we have this centuries later flash forward where, to your point, we find out Krem has been in the Phantom Zone all this time. We find out through the last bit of narration that the kind of fix for this was Ruth's book ended with Supergirl killing Krem, which was the cover story, so that the space pirates, if they were to enact their revenge, they would go after Supergirl and not Ruth.
Right.
But that's not what actually happened. Instead, Krem went to the Phantom Zone for centuries and initially was belligerent, but eventually saw the error of his ways. And by the end of his third century, really had a change of heart. So he's released from the Phantom Zone, right back out there on the hill where Krem had originally murdered Ruth's father. And so we have Supergirl, Krypto, Ruth, old Ruth, and Krem, and he's released. And he is begging forgiveness. He's contrite. And Ruth whacks him. Whacks him. And he falls, and Ruth walks in one direction, and Supergirl and Krypto walk in the other. Now, all that's the setup here. So your read on the end is that Ruth delivered a fatal killing blow.
Yeah.
Okay. Initially, I think that was mine as well. And look, we don't want to put too much stock in what we read on that, but I've seen all these Reddit debates about whether or not Krem is actually dead at the end. And a lot of people have pointed out the arm movements. It's like his arm is up, it moves to another position, and then ultimately it drops. Now, you can argue that that's him dying, right? I guess I'm not... I think ultimately, from my perspective, I do think it's open to interpretation. I'm not dead set on the reading that Ruth killed him, because I think if Ruth killed him, I feel like the message of this kind of falls apart for me, at least. I don't know if maybe it doesn't for you. I kind of read it more as, yeah, she like knocked him out, but not that he was dead. But again, I'm not firmly settled on this.
So my take is that this was a book that paid very close attention to camera angles, for lack of a better word, and how they're shooting the different scenes. And so this scene that I think is Krem's death is you're just watching these silhouettes of the characters from afar and they're blacked out. Whereas I think if they were going for more of a, she made him like come to repent for centuries in the Phantom Zone, only to have the punchline of him coming out and her like whacking him in the face, like for comedic value, that would have been presented much, much differently than this more like intense, somber, like you as the reader are at a remove from what's happening because it's not about you. It's about these two women and coming to their own conclusion. I don't think that it undercuts the rest of the book or the narration that Ruth was telling the readers, because what Ruth was telling the readers was like, oh, like Supergirl is not to be crossed. Like she is compassionate, but she has her limits, you know? And in the actual conclusion, we're seeing that Supergirl is like still like they're both still girls. Like they're old women and they've seen some shit, but like they have walked together on this path, and it's like they have this understanding. And I think this is part of Supergirl saying in the unreliable narration that she never forgot Krypton. Okay, Ruth was never going to forget this guy, and Supergirl is probably like, okay, you're never going to, like, what do you want to do with this guy? Like, this guy killed your dad. What do you want to do with him? I'll support you, kind of thing. So that's probably why people say like, oh, this is like redefining Supergirl because she kills and like Superman wouldn't. And it's like, well, it's not that she kills, it's that she will let other people kill and not get in their way, which is again like not super great, but it is a distinction.
Okay, no, I appreciate your perspective on this. I'm still not sure exactly where I land on this because there's. Yeah, I mean, to your point, in fairness, it's like if she doesn't kill him and it's just this whack, it's like, yes, a punchline, which that in and of itself might maybe weaken the overall point of this if that's kind of all it is.
Mm-hmm.
If she actually kills him, yeah, I mean, I guess it does tie into this idea of never forgetting, never letting it go. But I don't know, maybe in that instance, it's enough that in the moment where Kara was prepared to kill Krem for Ruth, that Ruth spoke up and stopped Kara from doing that. Maybe that's still intact here, but for Ruth herself, that she never could let this go, even after these centuries.
Yeah.
Just like Supergirl could never let Krypton go. I guess that works. So if that's the reading that Ruth kills Krem, I'm a bit I'm a bit less okay then with Supergirl here. Like I'm okay with her letting that planet stone that space pirate, that unrepentant after the horrors they wrought on that world. Here though, where this guy has done his penance, the warden of the Phantom Zone signs off on this. He's repentant. For Supergirl to stand by in this instance, it's like, I get it to a point, but it is hard for me to sort of lump it into the same category as her inaction during the stoning. Like I do feel like this is a little bit of a different situation.
I think that they're the same in that Supergirl is respecting the justice customs of the respective planets that she's on.
Okay.
Like where, not to keep bringing Superman into this, but like Clark is putting his like Midwestern American set of values onto the interactions that he's having wherever he is. And this feels more like Supergirl is like, oh, this planet is deeming the appropriate course of action is to stone this guy who killed their people. That's their thing. I'm going to let them do that. Like Ruth starts out the story being like, this dude killed my dad. I need to kill him. It's never really explicitly said that that's the justice system on this planet, but like her mom basically gives her blessing to go. So it feels like, at least in the terms of her family unit, this is deemed to be the appropriate like level of justice. So if we hold that to be true, Supergirl is simply respecting the justice customs on that planet, even if she doesn't necessarily personally agree with them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense as well. I mean, I guess the one other thought I have on this is if it's not a fatal blow, maybe I can make an argument that it's not merely just a punchline at the end of this. You know, maybe the reading could be that she has let the actual bloodlust go, but she still can't forgive. Like she's not going to embrace this guy and welcome him in. Like she's still going to whack him, but you know, might not necessarily kill him. I really welcome more audience feedback on the reading of this ending. I guess at the end of the day, my last question for you is, do you think it's meant to be open to interpretation? Or do you think like, no, this is a very kind of clear intention of what the end is?
I think it's pretty clear, again, based on how it's shot and colored and them like walking away like, okay, now it's done with that finality at the conclusion. I can see why, given the level of, you know, that these are comic book fans generally reading this, and comic book fans have learned, show me the body. I don't believe it unless I see a body. And even then there are workarounds. So like, yeah, we've been conditioned to believe that death is not final, at least in the comic book universes that we love.
Yeah. No, like I said, my initial read, I'd have to go back and listen to, because we covered this on an episode. We did an episode a few years ago on Up in the Sky and Woman of Tomorrow, the two Tom King Superman works. I'd have to go back. I don't remember what I said at the time, but I do feel like my initial read was that Ruth killed him. And then, you know, seeing more of these discussions online, I just got the sense that not everyone was sold on that being what actually happened. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps that's stemming from the same thing that's maybe motivating me of maybe it's just not sitting quite right that Supergirl would stand by for something like that, or really wanting it to be the case that when Ruth says, like, I get it, I get what you were trying to teach me, that held over all of these centuries. But I not to repeat myself, but I think even if she kills him in that moment, I think it's enough that she stopped Supergirl from killing him on the beach. I think that holds, and that's the important thing. And the fact that if she did kill him because 300 years later, she couldn't let it slide that this guy killed her father, I get it. I get it. So I think it works. I guess I'll differ from you a little bit. I do think there's enough room for interpretation, but I get what you're saying about how it's presented. And I guess the other thing that comes to mind is Batman the Killing Joke, the end of that, where it's like you have Batman putting his hands around the Joker's shoulders. Mm-hmm. And then we pan away as the laughter stops. And it's like, okay. So, but I do feel like that's a little bit different where we're purposely pulling away.
Yes.
As opposed to what we see here. I always go back to Morrison on that Kevin Smith podcast talking about it's the killing joke. He kills the Joker. But yeah, so I welcome other people's feedback on this. Once again, very curious how the movie will deal with this. If they do it all. And would they leave it as, again, to me, I think it's a little bit more open. I get that you do, but like, yeah, I wonder if they broach it, will it be as, will they make a much clearer statement about what happens there? Mm-hmm. I don't know. We'll find out.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
You want to zip back to the beginning now that we've covered the end?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've really unpacked a lot of this, but we could just kind of do a quick run through of the issues, anything that we haven't hit on yet that we want to, if that's cool with you.
Oh yeah.
All right. So again, we talked about the initial setup of this, of Ruth's father being killed, her leaving home, her going to this tavern, initially enlisting the help of this bounty hunter who knocks her around. Supergirl gets involved. We wake up the next morning. Supergirl's nursing this hangover. Ruth asks for her help. Supergirl refuses, even as Ruth is following her all the way back to Supergirl's ship. And, she's talking about like, look, I got a job to do. Like, I can't be doing this. But then it turns out that bounty hunter had tipped off Krem, and they show up at the ship, and we have this bit of a shootout. Crypto and Supergirl get hit with these arrows, and Krem makes off in Supergirl's ship. Anything else from this jump off issue that we didn't talk about that you want to?
I thought it was, I think maybe some of why people think that this is such a different interpretation of Supergirl is that in that very first issue, we see her bleeding and wounded from these arrows piercing her. Like, it's not enough to kill her, but it's such a rustic weapon compared to, like, she's the woman of tomorrow. She's got lasers coming out of her eyes, and it's like this arrow makes her bleed. And I think that to a lot of people was the signal of like, oh, this is going to be different.
We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics, many of them starring the Man of Steel, Logan's favorite character. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram @SingleBoundPodcast. My comic shop closed over a decade ago, but if there's one place where I feel that same sense of camaraderie, it's Fat Moose Comics, New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store, led by current owner Sean Hendricks. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany, New Jersey, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? That's exactly what Robbo is doing on This Podcast Will Never Die, which starts with all the ways the Man of Steel stood out on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. Yeah, so definitely a different context in which to see her. I'll say this. The whole idea of her going to a red sun planet to get drunk, she's entitled to it. I have no objection to this. I think back to the Flash television series on the CW where Cisco was able to make a special type of alcohol that would get Barry drunk because otherwise his metabolism wouldn't allow it. It's like, let them cut loose a little bit. So I'm cool with that.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So we have our setup here. And then the second issue, we have them on this Hall ferry, on this space bus, essentially. And I guess a couple of things that stood out to me here. This is minor, but this was a cool little bit that I hope pops up in one of the movies or elsewhere. This idea that people take Red K as a drug to give themselves visions. Like there are these little Red K pellets or what have you encased in lead. And Supergirl needs to take these because when a Kryptonian takes it, whatever they envision becomes true. So you could turn into a monster because there's a dragon that's out there in space in their way and she has to fight, but her powers are still depleted. So she needs this Red K boost. But I just thought that was a cool little bit there.
It's a terrific world building piece, especially because, she's still hungover and she's like, she's still in the part of the quest where she's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. She gets up in front of this grimy fairy and she's like, cough up. I know at least one of you has this. Like, I'm not here to fight you. I just want it.
Yeah. So I really like that. We also got this bit that we talked about that I must be in the movie. I would be shocked if it weren't. But this bit about this Kara teaching Ruth how to wash her hands. Very moving moment. Yeah.
I loved that they made that a full page of just like the panel showing the different hand washing motions. And again, like, given the context of when this book was written and released, like this is pandemic era writing. This is very deeply, like, clearly on the minds of the creative team of this book, where they're just like, wash your hands. Like they could have made it heavy handed and being like, this prevents disease and stuff like that. They're just like, no, like you should wash your hands. This is like self-care, best practice, like hygiene 101. This is how you wash your hands. But like, and it's like we're a few years removed from that intensity now, so it's easy to forget that that's the world in which this was written. But early pandemic, yeah, we were being inundated with like, you guys don't know how to wash your hands. You need like 30 seconds. You need between all your fingers. You need with it, like, so they're basically doing that, but in a different context. But this whole story was written in that time where we didn't know what was going on and everything was super intense. And the simple act of washing your hands, it was like, this could save you or the people around you. So like talking about like Supergirl being a savior figure, she's like, yeah, wash your hands. And them devoting a lot of space to that, I thought was really powerful and would have been even more impactful reading it when it was being published.
Yeah. I mean, such a simple act, but it speaks volumes. I wasn't thinking about the COVID of it all, but you're right. I think back to that time and all these hand washing instructions. I'm like, how dirty are you people? Like nobody knows how to wash their hands apparently, but apparently. So yeah, that definitely stood out. The other thing that I loved here, and Ruth makes the point in her narration that she's just showing us an instance of this, but it happened all the time, that Kara would be confronted by one of Cal's enemies because they see that S and they take their grudge out on her, which, is a whole other dynamic to the character. And I'm sure this is going to come up as we continue to make our way through our Supergirl fan journey here. And we survey all of these stories across time and media of her sharing this symbol with her cousin, having to operate in his shadow, live up to the example that he set, have enemies take out their gripes on her. So I like that aspect of it too. And I loved how badass she was in this as well, which is something that you're definitely seeing translate even just in that initial teaser trailer when Kara and Ruth are surrounded and she's like, this isn't going to end well for you, which is great. I love that. I love that mode for her.
No, it's interesting because she could choose to not wear that shield. Right. She could wear something else. We're in fact seeing her in a totally different outfit when she's getting drunk because she doesn't want anyone seeing her like that. Like she knows she's walking around with a target on her chest. She is making that choice. And I wonder also if it's sort of related to what I was saying earlier about, I do think that Superman does have a very specific perspective about what is right and good and what people should and should not be doing. And I think if Kara, this like pains me to say her name this way, but I'll play your game. So if Kara is doing like the same, encountering all of like the fallout from his actions and his choices, she's seeing a lot more of the consequences because people aren't necessarily going to go up to him and want to take their revenge out on him. They're picking her because they're like, oh, the girl won. She's smaller. She's weaker. And so it's maybe almost like she's choosing to attract that attention so that she can be reminded that all of her actions are going to have consequences like this too. And it's maybe adding to her being a little bit more conscientious about the cultural differences that she's encountering on different worlds.
Right on. Well, going back to what you're saying, so her not displaying her S shield when she's on the Red Sun planet getting drunk, do you think it's that, hey, she's in a vulnerable state, she doesn't want to attract this attention and have to fight when she's not prepared for it? Or is it that, yeah, she doesn't want to besmirch the shield, like she doesn't want to be seen wearing the shield being a little messy, or a little bit of both?
I think it's a third thing. It's actually related to something that she says early on in that dialogue, where she said, like, I cannot stop thinking about this, and for one day I wanted to forget. Like, she's drinking to forget her traumatic past. So I think her like intentionally swaddling her shield, her outfit, like she's going for like total identity like loss for that one day. Like that's her birthday gift to herself, is not being herself.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, Reed. Anything else on issue 2 before we move on to racist Maypole?
Ooh, we got to get into Maypole.
Yeah. So, I mean, we gave the basic setup for this, that we have this, seemingly idyllic, calm town where apparently Krem had been arrested. That's what brings them there. But Kara, with her X-ray vision, sees that there are these signs that have been painted over about, no purples. And even when they sign in at the inn, there's a column for blues and a column for purples. And like I said, ultimately through their investigation, we find out that the blues had discriminated against and segregated the purples, and then ultimately sold them out when the space pirates came, basically traded the purples for their continued survival. And you definitely see for Kara and Ruth how much this affects them, just the horror, the inhumanity, the evil of it. I welcome any other thoughts that you have.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most clear-cut issue in this series where the casual reader can look at it and be like, oh, yes, I have seen examples of discrimination like this in history books or in different parts of the world, even today, where it's like, this group has been othered from the group with more power. And so they're going to treat the group with less power with some really terrible behaviors. It's like very unfortunate that you can see that and immediately know what they're talking about. And it's also very uncomfortable. Like, by making these, I do think it was an intentional choice to make these aliens look more humanoid and have like these larger eyes that we tend to read as more vulnerable or being more childlike or innocent. And then you find out that they were just like, no, you can go kill all of those other people if you leave my people alone. Like, I think that is what really started grounding this book. And instead of it just being like Supergirl in space going off on an adventure to like find this dude, it's like, yeah, and like racism and people making terrible choices about one another is universal, and this book is really going to dig into those darker themes.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that, clearly a very conscious choice to depict the blues and the purples, but the blues especially as cute as they are here, because yeah, you wouldn't expect it of them. And then that's the point. So yeah, that one definitely very, very affecting. And that's the issue, right? That ends with Ruth saying it's too big or too small.
Yeah.
Right. Which then Kara will repeat at the end of the story, or at the climax of it. Mm-hmm. And then we have in issue 4, sort of this tour from world to world as Supergirl and Ruth are tracking Krem and these space pirates that he's now linked up with. And they're continuing to see the aftermath of the genocide wrought on all of these worlds. And yeah, definitely what stood out to me is what I mentioned before of Kara helping the gravedigger. And I loved the way that played, where, she so politely, gently asks if she could help. And he's like, well, it's my responsibility. And she replies, well, okay, but it's my responsibility as a friend or as a neighbor to try to help. And he allows her to. And his own child was amidst the fallen bodies there. And she's able to identify the child with a DNA scan. And that was particularly moving. I don't know. I think it was in this issue. I might be mixing up a couple of issues, but I think it's here where Ruth is talking about Supergirl's grief and how she processes it. And she talks about how, like, the whole thing with Supergirl isn't necessarily her action, what she does. It's what she holds back. It's like she doesn't turn on her heat vision. She stops the heat vision from blasting out. And Ruth kind of goes through the various powers. And I thought that was one of the things that I'll continue to say across these episodes is I like when we can draw these distinctions between Clark and Kara, where we can see a different point of view, a different way of operating. And even something like that was interesting. Just like in the trailer for the movie, the whole idea of Clark, my cousin, sees the best in everyone. I see the truth. I like that difference of perspective. And so to kind of have Ruth articulate this whole idea of what Supergirl holds back, that resonated. I like that. It also called to mind the first Avengers movie, the whole bit about Bruce Banner, his secret throughout the whole movie. Oh, that's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry. So it kind of called that to mind. But yeah, that one definitely was a standout issue as well. What else stood out to you about that one?
Probably the fact that, after that Gravedigger accepted her help, and she came back and she said, I figured out where your daughter is buried. Do you want to go there now? Or do you want to check my work and finish up here? And he goes, well, we should finish up here and then we'll go see her. And it was sort of like they were both on that same level of this terrible thing has happened, but we're going to put the community before ourselves individually. So I thought that was a really impactful moment that was really talking about the whole point of the theme that they're exploring, where it's like, oh, it's too big, we're so small. What can you do? You can help somebody dig a grave,
You can do that. You can teach someone to wash their hands. That's the thing. These small, quiet acts of kindness, of compassion, that's what kind of carries the day. No, I really like that a lot. And then as we move along here, issue 5, they finally catch up with Krem, but he hits them with a Mordru orb. I like this little bit of magic. I don't really love the magic stuff generally, audience, but I like this little bit here with this Mordru orb or globe that can transport someone to the other edge of the universe. And so he hits them with this, and they get teleported to this planet that has a green kryptonite sun. And this planet had been created as a trap, as a prison for Superman. And he had experienced this before and told Supergirl about it. And they've got, 10 hours until sundown. So she has to hold on. Mm-hmm. Ruth has to protect her from these dinosaurs, essentially. The one thing about this, as a Superman fan, this whole bit about how Clark only made it 45 minutes before he needed a bailout from the Justice League. Yet Kara is able to make it 10 hours. And at the end of the issue, she makes this remark. She's like, 45 minutes. And then it's bleeped out, but presumably she's like, what a bitch.
Yeah.
Look, I know we need to show the character's strength. And I just said, I like these distinctions between them. I don't need to know that we need to put Superman down per se, but I like this overall. I thought this was another standout.
All right. So I'm guessing that this is based off of a previous issue of a Superman comic. It's feeling Silver or Bronze Age.
It is. I meant to as I was reading, I had the exact same thought, and I was like, this probably is a pull from, because in the Superman movie, the whole bit about the hypno glasses, that came from the comics, and Tom King was the one who told James Gunn about it. So yeah, part of it does have a very, I was thinking Silver or Bronze Age feel to it. Yeah.
So
I wouldn't be surprised.
I kind of want to. Well, it's the way that they worded it with the Justice League came to rescue him. Again, this is unreliable narrators. This is just Kara interpreting whatever Cal told her, and it's I bet he was alone. She has somebody who's guarding her. She was not necessarily going to survive that dinosaur that spiky dinosaur who came over to eat her, she only got through that because Ruth was there with a sword to stab it. Like, so I'm pretty sure, like, on the Superman trapped on this planet, like, he was alone. He was maybe not going to make it without the Justice League coming to bail him out. And Supergirl was not going to make it alone. She made it with somebody who had her back.
No, right. No, I'm not going to die on this hill. It's all, no, but I agree with that. And also, this was well, number one, I like the setup of this trap of a planet. I do think that's pretty cool. But what I liked here is that you got to have Ruth really step up for Kara, right? So, because I think it's important that it's not just Kara looking out for Ruth throughout the whole story, that Ruth had her moment here, and she really stepped up and defended her friend. So I dug that one a lot. And obviously they're able to make it until sundown and then continue on their quest. And at this point, we kind of get into these last few issues here, which we've already talked about, a good amount. But in issue 6, Krem hits them with another one of these Mordru orbs. But this time, Supergirl is able to outrace it on the back of Comet. And as this is happening, like we said before, we get this recounting of her origin. So I guess we already talked about a lot of this. The one thing that really did get me and elicited an emotional reaction, certainly as a father of a son, not a daughter, but this whole idea of Kara's father, what he does convey to her about, you'll always be my little girl. Like, even decades later, as you look back on the moments of your life, like, you'll still be all the highs and lows, the triumphs and failures, you'll still be my little girl. Like, that really hit. And King talked in his introduction about how he ultimately wrote this for his daughter. So, you definitely feel that. Ooh. You definitely feel that emotion on the page here. So that stood out.
I 100% started tearing up when I read that page, because I was just like, yeah, your relationship to everybody around you in the world is going to be slightly different, and how people like not to be like really like analytical about it, but how like people interpret your presence. And if for those like family bonds, like, yeah, she lost her whole planet, but she'll be able to look back on that moment and be like, I was his daughter. I'm going to start crying again. We got to switch. It's like, it's really well written, and it's not a level. Again, this is a book that is really delving in to those emotions and sitting with them in a way that most superhero comics simply don't, because they don't have to or need to, and not every story needs it. But it's this story deciding to make us really, really confront those emotions with Kara is, I think, why this book is such a standout to so many people.
Absolutely. And this recounting of the origin, I mean, like I said, the whole idea of the escape by way of Argo City, and then Argo City being compromised, and then arriving on Earth, and this whole business about arriving after Kal was grown, these pieces had been in place, but this definitely highlighted how traumatic this would be, because it's one thing to sort of recount this in a few pages. It's another to really, like we were saying before, like really sit in it and amplify the horror, the tragedy of this, to lose that initial world, and then have people around you, including her mother in this telling of the story, succumb to kryptonite radiation. And then this arduous task of laying down all the lead shielding. And apparently all the other people around her gave up due to fatigue, exhaustion, and she kept going. And then to once again have the city be on the brink of destruction. So yeah, it's one of those things. So we just did a Patreon episode. It's out now. People can check it out on Mr. Miracle. And I've come around a good bit on that work. I didn't love it the first time around. I enjoyed it a lot more now. I think I'm not becoming a Tom King fan per se here. Don't pin that on me just yet, but I'm more open to his work. And clearly the idea of mining trauma is a core aspect of his work. And I think in instances, I talked about this with Scott Free and Mr. Miracle, to have been traded to this hellscape of a planet and subjected to the cruel tutelage of Granny Goodness while Orion grows up in the lap of luxury on this utopia. It's like, yeah, how would that mess with you? There'd be so much trauma there. Similarly here, when you see everything that Kara has gone through, it's I guess my point is with King, and especially to any of Tom King's detractors, I think it's one thing if he were sort of, I don't know, making up a trauma that didn't exist or glomming something new onto the character. But I think in these instances, at least, it's there.
It's all there.
And it's there to be mined. And where I was saying before, where it's not like he's inventing this out of whole cloth. You go back to the Brainiac storyline by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, post Infinite Crisis, where they introduced the one true Brainiac. There, you had Kara talking to Clark in the Fortress about how traumatic it was to have lived through Brainiac's abduction of Kandor. And it was this horrific story that like kept her up at night. And in that story, she talks about how, you're lucky. You don't have any memories of Krypton, right? So like that aspect, definitely has been there, amplified and mined more here, which is good. So I feel like it feels more of a piece with this iteration of the character.
See, now I have big feelings again because I'm just thinking when she was lying on that rock under that green sun, feeling the pain of it, was she just lying there thinking, is this how my mom felt before she died? Like,
yeah.
Ooh.
I know.
An unfortunately rich text to be diving into.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's not said explicitly, but you have to imagine that thought crossed her mind. And then we have issues 7 and 8, our big climax of the story, which, I already laid out, I think, most, if not all of the major plot points. Anything we haven't talked about with the finale, plot-wise or thematically, that we should talk about?
In terms of the narration, I think it's very, very interesting that Ruth is kind of giving us a glimpse into just how well known Supergirl is in the universe beyond Earth, because she's like, well, I'm not really going to get into the thing with the pirates because you already read this poem and you saw this poem. And she's like name dropping all these things that, we as Earthbound readers don't know about and haven't read. But it's clear that Supergirl, when she does something bigger or more dramatic, like it's talked about, it becomes legend, it becomes tales. And I thought that was an interesting way to tell that story because it gives us as the reader a little bit more information about the DC universe and how information travels and how different planets might know some of these characters that are like very well known on Earth, but might have a little bit more recognition beyond the solar system. So I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as we wind down here, kind of some closing thoughts to tie this all together. I guess where I land on this, I'm a fan. I think, or I hope that it will lend itself well to this big screen adaptation. Obviously, like we're saying, there are some pieces we sort of question how hard they'll go and whether they'll really be equipped to explore it the way the book does. But I think there are a lot of ingredients here that will work. I guess to those who maybe haven't gravitated towards this or feel like it's too much of a departure for the character, I would push back and say, I think, take another look at it. I don't think this version of the character is as far removed from what's come before as maybe she's been made out to be. And yes, if you can get past the fact that she's on a red sun planet drinking on her 21st birthday and she curses a little bit in this, I think you'll find the core is there. At least that's my read on it. And that montage of compassion really goes such a long way. But then on the other hand, I guess to those who hold this up as like the only Supergirl story for them, that's totally fine. Right? If Supergirl begins and ends with Woman of Tomorrow for you, right on, have at it. But there are other good stories. And I would particularly recommend that Sterling Gates run from the relatively recent past. That's against the backdrop of the new Krypton saga. So there is some other stuff going on that you might not necessarily have the context for, but having just reread it in a vacuum, it really does hold up. So there's other great Supergirl material out there. So that's what I would sort of say to people who are kind of on either end of Woman of Tomorrow. And that's where I land. Any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, I was thinking about how Supergirl is still, like, as a character in all of these different iterations, she's still in the process of becoming herself. Like, generally, when we're reading a Superman story, he's fully formed. We know what's going on. He's an adult. He's in a career. He is, he's established as a hero and as in his alter ego. But Kara is like, she was a teenager when she was torn away from everything that she knew. So like, she's a survivor. She's a refugee. She has a family member that she does not know because he was an infant when they last parted. And so she's like a teenager to like the next level of being a teenager where it's just like everything is different all the time. So like, yeah, this is a little bit different because she's 21 and not like technically a teenager anymore, but she's still like a character in this universe, a person who's in the process of becoming who she's going to be.
Yes. And that idea of the process. And I've been saying this with the Supergirl movie, because yes, we are picking up with her at, in fairness, a low point, but let's see the journey that she goes on. Because I think it's important to give these characters somewhere to go. You know, Clark had his own arc in that Superman movie in terms of recognizing what his true ultimate influences were in making him the man that he is. I think this Supergirl here will have a bit more to go, but I think that's a good thing. That's interesting. And to your point, it's like we love the Superman origin stories. I watched 10 years of Smallville. Loved it. And so here too, it's like, yeah, you do have a hero who's still in the process of being formed. And not to keep bringing up Sterling Gates here, but he had a great introduction to one of the Supergirl Silver Age omnibus editions. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how even in the pre-crisis landscape, in a rare exception from most comic book characters, Kara was allowed to grow up. She got older, like she went to college. She became a young woman. So here too, it's like now you're continuing to see her progress in a way that, you don't often see for comic book characters who are typically perpetually already frozen adults in time. Yeah, or already adults frozen in time. So you're getting to see that. So yeah, I'm so glad we got to connect and have you on the show and talk about this work. Most of what we're going to be doing over the next dozen or so episodes, for the most part, will be going chronologically through Supergirl across time and media. But I wanted to break with that at the outset here and start with this because it's the basis for the movie. It's in the conversation right now. Everybody's talking about it. So I wanted to start with this. I know we have some audience members who've been kind of waiting to read it or reread it. So hopefully this will prompt people to do it. And yeah, I wanted to start with this. I'm so glad that we did. And I thank you so much for joining me.
Oh yeah, this was a blast. Anytime.
Awesome. What do you want to share with folks about I Read Comic Books or anything else that you want to share?
Oh yeah. I Read Comic Books is a weekly comic podcast where we have a rotating panel of hosts. So you always get a slightly different perspective on what we're reading and what we think is interesting in comic books. We recently recorded our 500th episode.
Wow. So, congratulations.
Yeah. So we got things going on. Our main host and our producer, Mike Rappin, is actually out on paternity leave right now. So we're trying some new things. I'm hosting a few shows. Some of my other colleagues are hosting a few other shows. We've got a variety of topics. We've got a lot of mini series on our Patreon that are like more kind of like deep dives, like what you do over here, Anthony. So I think there's a lot for everybody who enjoys comics. So come on and check us out.
Cool. Well, I'll put the link in the show notes. I hope people will check that out. And thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
Audience, thank you so much. Thank you for bearing with me here as my voice struggles to recover. Hopefully it'll be a little bit better next week, but I'm so glad that we were able to do this. I hope you enjoyed the start of our Supergirl coverage. A lot more to come over these next few months, up to and including the release of the new movie. So keep tuning in. And until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Rewards include our DCU spinoff podcast, advanced listens, sponsorship opportunities, and more. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please rate and review the podcast via your platform of choice, subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Lighting the Bat Signal, a Batman fan journey, which applies the signature Digging for Kryptonite approach to the Dark Knight, as well as another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, now in its final year covering the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.